Okay, let's kick things off. We're diving into the source material you sent us, and wow, it starts with a bang. The best media law is no law.
Yeah, that's quite the opening statement, isn't it? Really sets the stage.
It absolutely does. Sort of throws down the gauntlet right away. So, this deep dive is based on excerpts from Freedom of Communication and the Press, specifically that article, The Best Media Law is No Law, by the Duke of Earl NL.
And it's really a reflection on, well, media law, obviously, but also freedom of the press, the role of reporters, all that good stuff.
And it seems the author's own background really informs this perspective, growing up in Hilversum.
Right, the heart of Dutch broadcasting.
Exactly. And his father worked at the National Signal Factory, NSF, which became PTI, Philips Telecom Industry, then ATT eventually.
Yeah, so he was right there, surrounded by the infrastructure, the technology of it all from a young age, plus that early interest in photography and news.
Sparked by the Vietnam War coverage, the World Press photo books, you can see how seeing those powerful images would make an impression.
Definitely. So the mission here for us and for you listening is to really unpack this provocative idea, no media law as the ideal.
Right. We'll use the Dutch experience, how their media regulation evolved, as a kind of case study.
And then think bigger picture.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for freedom of communication today?
Okay, so let's go back. Early days of Dutch broadcasting post-World War II, the author points out it started with pretty strict regulations.
Yeah, facilitated technically by that national signal factory we mentioned. And the government had clear goals.
Uh-huh. Morality and decency, that was the aim.
Right, and programs had to be in the general interest and uplifting. It sounds quite prescriptive.
It does. Sort of a top-down approach. You wonder how well that sat with everyone at the time.
Well, it led to the NRU, the National Radio Union, which apparently didn't last that long.
Seems like they quickly realized they needed a different model, maybe something more sustainable financially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which led to this dual system. Public broadcasters, like the NOS channels, and independent commercial stations. And this developed under what the author calls soft regulation.
Soft regulation, meaning?
Well, a mix, really.
Yeah.
Dutch law, politics, but also, crucially, those European human rights treaties, like the European Convention on Human Rights, guaranteeing freedom of expression.
Ah, okay. So less direct government control than at the very start.
Definitely a shift.
Now, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. The author brings in Gerard Schuyt's idea
Yeah.
that the means of communication is not relevant for the message. The content is freedom of expression, and moreover today, information.
That's a powerful thought, especially considering when it might have first been formulated. Really looks past the technology.
It does, and the author uses this to argue for freedom of communication as something bigger.
Broader than just freedom of information or freedom of expression on their own.
Yeah, it's like it encompasses the whole process, the freedom to receive information, to gather it, and then to share it, not just the sharing part.
I see. So it's the entire flow, the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. But then there's the flip side, the harsh reality.
Right. The theory of free press versus the reality of suppression.
Yes. Governments pushing back, and even violence against journalists. It's not just theoretical.
And the author connects this back to his childhood, seeing those Vietnam images, the World Press photos.
Yeah.
He mentions journalists who died on the job.
It brings home the danger, doesn't it? It wasn't just an abstract idea for him.
Not at all. He understood the risks involved in getting that information out there.
He even shares that personal detail, wanting to be press, putting that official USA Army photographer badge on his school bag.
From the airbase to Osterberg, yeah. It shows that deep connection.
And working in photo labs, seeing things like the Tiananmen Square photos, stuff the public wouldn't necessarily see.
Uncensored reality. It really highlights what a truly free press can show you. The raw truth.
Which kind of leads into the next point, doesn't it? How technology is changing things now.
You mean like, who gets to be a reporter?
Yeah. Streaming, interactive apps. Anyone with a phone can potentially document and share what's happening around them.
It's a potential democratization of reporting for sure.
But, as the author notes, that potential isn't universal.
No. In places with war, unstable economies, harsh climates, autocratic rule, the ability to just film and share isn't there. The freedom, or even the basic means, might be missing.
Right. Now, the author talks about the reporter's role using the analogy of society's guard dog.
I like that, guard dog.
Yeah, it's about, addressing social needs, asking tough questions, digging up facts.
And even voicing unpopular opinions, right? That's part of it too.
Yes, exactly. He even includes the idea that free expression might need to shock or disturb or even offend.
The God is crazy example. That certainly pushes boundaries.
It does, and it makes you ask, where are the limits? And what about the pressure from governments or just society that leads to self-censorship?
That's a constant tension, isn't it?
And this all links back to democracy. The author sees democracy as the best vet for free, factual news.
But not a guarantee against conflict or disagreement.
No, definitely realistic about that.
Yeah.
Which brings us to fake news.
The elephant in the room.
The author sees it as a deliberate tactic, used to create doubt, fear.
Show division, yeah.
And he makes this interesting distinction, contrasting a journalist with a poet who he says lies the truth.
Meaning using fiction or narrative to get at a deeper truth, perhaps.
I think so. Whereas the journalist's goal is primarily public information, free from repression. And in that sense, he argues any citizen can be a reporter.
If the intent is to share information openly.
Right. But then you bump up against other values, freedom of information versus
Privacy, national security, personal safety.
Exactly, those inherent conflicts.
Hmm.
He mentions that Dutch legal change in 1978, allowing certain words on TV that were previously banned, seems minor now maybe, but shows how these lines shift.
Yeah, the goalposts are always moving.
But the warning about information wars feels very current, very serious.
Definitely. Disinformation, false narratives, the potential to really damage social structures is huge. It can be, as he implies, lethal in its own way.
And this leads to the pressure on rights, individual rights, group rights. It feels like that pressure is immense right now.
Unprecedented, maybe. And the danger for those who interpret the free word.
He gives the example of Shireen Abu Akleh.
Yeah, the Al Jazeera journalist, killed in action. It highlights a breakdown, maybe, in even the basic rules of engagement and the absolute necessity of that kind of reporting, even when it's incredibly dangerous.
It's sobering. Then there's that Janis Joplin quote he includes.
Freedom's just another word for nothing else to lose.
Yeah. Makes you stop and think, what does freedom really mean? What's the cost?
And the author stresses that while freedom of speech is vital for democracy, for a civil society,
it shouldn't be a shield for hatred or just, baseless attacks.
there has to be some responsibility, some consideration of impact. It's not an absolute right in a vacuum.
Then there's the popcorn analogy. I quite like that.
Sweet, salt, or a mix.
Yeah. Basically, people choose their information sources based on preference, and that's their right.
It acknowledges the subjective side of how we consume information. We all have our tastes, our biases.
And finally, that closing anecdote. Finding the old 1948 magazine, Panorama.
With the headline, Terrorists Storm English Police Post, Palestine.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about perspective. Is that headline opinion? History? Just reflecting the times?
Or maybe reflecting the viewpoint of that specific publication, or even the prosperity of its readers back then. It raises so many questions.
And that final thought. Will we ever truly understand each other's perspectives?
It's a deep question. That historical snapshot really shows how framing and context shape everything.
So, wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are the big takeaways? There's definitely this core tension, isn't there, between the ideal of total communication freedom
And the practicalities, regulation, censorship, real danger for journalists.
and the Dutch example shows one way a system tried to navigate that, evolving over time.
So, for you listening, what really stood out from all this? What does looking back at media history tell us about our current information chaos?
Yeah, what challenges, what opportunities do you see now?
And maybe mull over that 1948 headline again. Terrorists storm English police post, Palestine.
How much is our understanding always shaped by who's telling the story, when they're telling it, and who they're telling it to?
Is framing always subjective? How does time change our view of events?
Definitely food for thought as you scroll through your feeds today.